going to be wrestling with that question of what is real, and then it's going to lead into the question of what is truth. And I think that's where the ministry impact is huge, and the reliance, having the faith tradition inform what truth is, as opposed to, what might be out there. I think it's easy for us to be like, hey, give us a online content filter
Just give me a filter.
and we're good. And it's like, you're not really preparing the
Yeah.
next
Yeah.
generation for digital communication.
Jonathan Haidt calls our cultural moment more than a demographic of people, our cultural moment of 2024, 2025, the anxious generation, and we're all a part of it. He compares growing up on planet Earth versus if we were to grow up on Mars, is the difference between a play-based childhood and a phone-based childhood.
You are the guardian of your own dreams.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever it is that God has laid in your heart, like, own that and protect it. And even like a dream like we have right now, like some of the things that we've been dreaming with friends, it's like, it's valuable when people speak into that, but it's also something that
It's no one else's responsibility
correct
to make it
Wow.
happen.
like
We want to invite you to Minneapolis, Minnesota for the Young Adults Today Leader Conference as we gather with young adult ministry leaders, next-gen pastors, lead pastors, youth pastors, those in campus ministry, and their teams. It's really an event designed for leaders and their volunteers, interns, and teams. We'll gather together for times of worship and prayer, dream sessions, brainstorming, growing in godly community, making and meeting friends. But there'll be panel sessions, breakout sessions, Q&A, meals together, free time, main sessions, speakers, and so much more. This is a world-class event and conference, but it's not just an event, it's a community, and it won't be the same without you in the room. We hope you'll make plans to join us in Minneapolis for the 6th annual Young Adults Today Leader Conference. You can visit the link in the show notes, or more details are available at youngadults.today/conference. youngadults.today/conference.
Hey, everybody, this is Micah with the Young Adults Today podcast. If you are looking to understand more of what AI is, technology, social media, and the future things we have to look forward to, we interview Matt and Jill Reed, who are on the cutting edge and the forefront of helping us uncover and discover how we can be helpful in the realm of the church setting, the marketplace, and our home, what that looks like when it comes to social media. Well, happy Monday, everybody. This is the Young Adults Today podcast. I'm Micah Keneally.
I'm Josiah Keneally. We're your hosts. This is a space and a place about the faith of the next generation, the future of the church. Our guests today are Matt and Jill Reed. Welcome to the show, you guys.
yeah, thanks for having us.
Yes, you're welcome. Thank you for joining us. It'll be so much fun.
Seriously, we're going to talk about the future of the church, really technology and ministry and that intersection of that space. And I mean, at the time of recording this, Bitcoin's buzzing, there's Web 3.0, there's things like cryptocurrency, and how does a physical church interact with a digital landscape? There's digital ministry, all sorts of things. So we're going to talk with Matt and Jill. But before we do, I just want story time real quick. I want to share a quick story. We had a dream 5 years ago. The year was 2019. And we sat around a table with some young adult ministry leaders who said, why is there no podcast for young adult ministry? Mike and I are like, who wants to lead it? They're like, you all. Mike and Josiah, you do it. And so one of the first people we shared the dream with was Matt Reed. And I'm honest, like, you lent us your studio at the district office on your day off on Fridays. That's where we got our start, and some mics. And we're now about 300 episodes deep, 5 years in, but could have never happened if you hadn't breathed life on it. And we're people of honor, and we just honor you for thanks for believing in this.
Oh man, you guys are amazing. It's amazing to see where it's come, how far it's come.
Oh my gosh, only God. So we just want to have some fun today. And we just want to say thank you for not only for believing in us 5 years ago, or 5 years ago.
Yeah,
Oh my
5
gosh. When you said 2019, it sounded like in 2000.
Yeah,
I don't know, back in the olden days. Like, oh my gosh, travel. But we know that God's placed some big dreams in your guys' heart, and just the mission that he's placed in you and in your family. And we just want the audience to kind of get to know what you're up to and what God is doing. But before we do that, we always ask every single guest that we have on this podcast, obviously the Young Adults Today podcast, we talk about the next generation. And you have some soon to be young adults in the next
True.
coming years. It'll
Yeah.
feel like a blink of an eye. But we always want to ask the question for both of you, could answer it. Why is young adult ministry so vital?
Me to go first?
Yeah.
Um, it's so important to invest in the next generation. You know, you mentioned our boys. Our boys are 11 and 13, and it is crazy. Like just around the corner, they will be young adults, and kind of shepherding that whole transition of life from adolescence into adulthood. Like it's a crazy journey. And, you know, part of our history has been, you know, youth pastors in the past, and we've been involved with ministry for so many years. And the importance of it comes down to like passing on what we know, passing on what we've learned to that next generation and preparing them for leadership. I think of a time when Quinn was probably 7 years old, and we were at an event recording video, and it was a youth event, and we were just having a blast when Quinn came down with me near the front, and I put the camera in his hands, and this is like a, you know, $3,000 to $5,000 camera, and I just put it in his hands. I said, "Hey, shoot some video," and I took a step back and watched him, and he's doing it, and I'm like, I don't. Like I don't, he doesn't even need me. And that realization of like how important it is in that moment to invest in the next generation to
Yeah.
prepare them for the future and prepare them for leadership. And especially within the church, I think I'm glad we have leaders like you
Yeah.
who are um, just bringing it to the forefront, young adult ministry, because it's so important that we pass on leadership to the next generation. It's vital to the um, longevity and existence of the church. I think one of the struggles that I've seen over the last couple decades of ministry is you see it's tougher for the older generation to pass on leadership. It's tough to let go. But we're seeing a whole generation of pastors and leaders who are ministering with open hands and realizing like we need to pass on what we've learned. We need to pass on and trust young adults with leadership in the church. And just like me giving up that camera to the to my 7-year-old, it's the same idea. Like it's not about me. It's about passing on to the next generation. That's why what you're doing is so valuable and so important.
Yeah. And I would add to that too, like, I think it's important to show that they're valued because I remember being that age and
Yeah.
it's like you weren't important in the church until you had kids. So it was like this weird, you're not a teenager anymore, so you're not in a youth group, you're not old enough to hang with the old people at McDonald's, and then you're not a young parent. And so there was this weird gap even for us in ministry. It was hard to have friends or make friends because people our age weren't going to church. We were because we were paid to. I
Yep.
mean,
Yep.
we probably would have anyway, but it's really difficult. And then it's easy to feel like you're not valued or important. And I think it's untrue because, like Matt said, it's actually vital that we have young people in ministry and in the church.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I can't get past the imagery, Matt, that you shared about handing this expensive piece of technology to your son. And I think that the church is like that, that leadership is like that. Like as I look back on my life, there was people who allowed me a shot at preaching or allowed
Yeah.
me a small group to lead and I had no clue what I was doing or a whole bunch of opportunities, like even leading a missions trip. I was 22. Like, what were they thinking? But then you go, oh, maybe they were thinking because I think there's this opportunity with technology and ministry, and we're going to dive deep here in a second, but I think older generations can actually be reversed mentored by younger generations when it comes to some of the digital side, some of the, if you're a digital native, like you understand every aspect of technology. It's just been, you're fluent in the communication of it. And as like, I'm only 33, but Zoom still updates every Monday morning. And sometimes it's hard to figure out, even though we've done 300 of these, like sometimes I'm embarrassed, like, they changed the button and I need to
Yeah.
find it.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, there's a lot to catch up on and stay current on, but I
Yep.
found that relationships with younger. Quick example. There's a young adult that I met at the Mall of America. He started a faith journey. This is way back, probably 10 years ago. But when even sometimes figuring out technology, he's one of my go-to people that can help me when I hit a problem and troubleshooting. And life is better with relationships, and intergenerational relationships are a part of that. But you touched on it. Can you guys kind of unpack some of your story and passion and journey?
Yeah, it's like, how do you wrap that up succinctly? Um, yeah, we've been involved in ministry for a number of years. Started out first youth pastoring in 1998.
I think so. We were like just college kids.
Just college kids trying to, lead teenagers who were like 3 years younger than us.
Totally. I've been there.
But that's kind of how we got our start in ministry, was in the local church. And from there, we had worked at the Assemblies of God district office and working in youth ministry there. So help organizing youth camps, youth conventions. And then after some time there, we're back in the local church, doing youth ministry again, but also associate ministry. So, one of the things that we did was we were tasked with creating videos.
Yeah, the video announcements.
Video announcements. So we did the top 3, and they became like this production for us, which was a lot of
It's
fun.
like what we looked forward to every week was making these silly little like 3-minute video announcements.
And we had pastors who believed in us and basically did the same thing that we did with Quinn. It was like they just gave us the equipment, and they're like, "Hey, we need videos, and then we need announcement videos and testimonies." And that was a fun 4 years, like just being able to create and being the trust that they gave us for that. And it just became a thing. The whole video side of it, we're like, we've dabbled in it for years, but this is like, wow, this is fun. We like creating, we love storytelling. And so that moment, it was around 2012, and there was a shift right around that same time was when there was a shift from cameras being tape driven. And we still say, hey, we're taping this Zoom session today, because everything used to be recorded on tape.
Yep.
And there right then was the transition into digital media. It was just you actually inserting an SD card. So it was like this perfect time for us, technology wise, for us, even in our 30s, to be taking that transition and learning on the fly how to do video. And it became something that we were really passionate about.
Yeah.
And in that process, we're like, well, let's do a little bit of this on the side. So we started doing, working with nonprofits and telling their stories and some missions work. And it just kind of grew from there. And we eventually had a conversation with some of the leadership at the district office. And one of the things that they wanted to get better at was storytelling. And so we had the conversation with Pastor St. John at the time. And then, it was Pastor Mark Dean after that. But how can we improve our communications at a district level, working with the 250 Assemblies of God churches in Minnesota? And so we were able to, again, privileged and honored to be able to do that. Sometimes it was through articles and writing. Sometimes it was through traveling and, visiting pastors and putting that in video format. But that was just a really, really I don't know, it was energizing, it was life-giving, and it was also just a great way for us to learn and increase our skill set and to just continue to grow in storytelling. And then we kind of took a leap of faith and then took our side hustle, which at the time was 30 Story. Our side hustle became the main hustle. And so we've been doing video work for the past 2.5 years, still staying active and involved in ministry and creating videos. But that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah, I would say the last 2.5 years have been like full time for Matt, because he'd been doing kind of the 2 jobs at once, which I couldn't have done, but somehow he managed it. But it is cool, I think, for us to be able to, like he was saying, sharing those stories of like ministers and stuff around Minnesota too, and seeing in these small towns the big victories that they're having, and being able to have other people like get behind that and cheer for them. And that was awesome to be a part of.
Yeah, because there's huge value in storytelling. And what we found with creating those stories for other pastors, sometimes in rural contexts, is that other people would say, hey, they can do it. I can do that. You know what I mean? See what they're doing in their community, or see what they're doing with their young adult ministry or youth ministry, whatever it is. It's empowering, it's encouraging. And so there's so much value in, found so much value in storytelling. That's something that's still a huge part of our hearts.
And you guys are some of the best storytellers on planet Earth. And
Oh,
you're also really humble. So I'll jump in and say, like, man, if you're a leader listening and you have a dream that needs to be illustrated, visually communicated, like, you need to check out 30 Story, the work that they're doing. If we have permission from you, I'll pause the interview, and when I edit it, I'll add in a little 30 Story clip. I'm thinking of the one from 30 for Freedom with
Sure.
Brent Silky. Like, maybe we can use that video. I want the listener and especially the viewer on YouTube to get a glimpse at just there's something that's breathtaking about a video that's done well and about a story. Like, why is Hollywood? Mark Batterson says that movies are and stories are like the modern day stained glass, and we're
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
of imagination and narrative. Like, so much of scripture is and our faith is passed on through narrative and story. And so, man, like, I'm serious. If you're thinking about getting some video projects done in 2025, you need to check out 30 Story for sure.
I love that. Well, and the amazing thing is just even looking at not only the ability to storytell through video, like people love visuals. People learn there's a connection when you're interviewing people, when you're getting those aerial shots, when you're doing anything. And I think what we really realized as the world, or at least even in the US, realizing that when COVID happened and took place, there was only 10 to 20% of people that actually had some form of online church happening and taking place, like through
Yeah.
video, full streaming. And then when COVID hit, it went to like 80%, 90% that were full-fledged. If we can't get people in front of us, then we need to get in front of them. And that's what you help doing, is bring forth stories of getting in front of people. And even the last like 10, 20 years, how have you seen the digital progression of any form of photography, videography, storytelling? How have you seen that evolve in the realm of ministry?
Well, it's interesting, I think, for our generation, Generation X. Um, it's funny because we're a generation that's gone from analog to digital. We didn't grow up digital, but we've been some of the first early adopters. And so it's crazy to think, we were just talking about this the other day, that like we're older than Google. Like seeing, and you feel like Google's been around forever, but like the reality of like how quickly things have changed in just 20 years.
Yeah.
And so even youth ministry, when we started out in 1998, there was no Facebook, there was no Instagram, TikTok, no Snapchat, none of that existed.
You would barely text kids. Like, a lot of them didn't have cell
Cell
phones.
phones had just come out. Google had just started in 1998. So like all of these things that are now like ubiquitous and just like part of our everyday lives didn't even exist when we started in ministry, which would be 25, 26 years ago. So yeah, a lot has changed. And when we came back, we went back into local church ministry, and we're leading youth group, and that was early days of social media, and so early days of digital communication. And so even then, like, that's just like 12 years ago, and how much has vastly changed since then. It's like it is evolving so fast and so quickly. And the biggest change, I think, was during COVID, like you mentioned. And at that point, when I was at the district office, and that was the huge thing, was like every church realizing we need a digital presence. And even leading up to that, for a long time, we were trying to coach churches and ministries and saying, hey, your front door is no longer your physical front door. Your front door is your website.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh, the
that's
websites that look like they're from 1998, the neon
Yes.
colors. I'm like, oh dear, this is old.
Yeah.
Like clip art.
Yes. Oh
And
my
like
gosh.
trying to coach pastors through that, and realizing that people are first visiting your online presence before they actually show up on a Sunday morning. And I think COVID really just forced that, which I think was a really good thing. Getting churches to realize that, like, hey, there's a digital frontier that we need to be a part of, and we can't be behind.
And I honestly think there's such a correlation between that and parenting, because we also do address a lot of parenting stuff with No Curtains, which is this thing we're working on. But I think there was this evolution and realization all at the same time during COVID of like, oh, there's a lot out there and there's no guidance. It's like the Wild West. And
Yep.
as parents and as, you know, people in churches were learning, like there were so many things. You say things you can't take back online, or
Yep.
you know, like all these rules and ways to maneuver, and you have zero guidance because nobody ahead of you has gone through this.
Yeah.
You're the first ones. And I think we realized that too with like parenting. There's so much online, and there's so much, what's that thing where it's like the internet isn't like access to the world, it's the world's access to you or to your kids. And
Yeah.
Mm.
yeah, I think during that time, both in churches but at home, I think people were learning like the wonders and the real traps of social media and the kind of the digital world.
No kidding. I mean, we've watched it in our lifetime. We're millennials. So I mean, right behind you all. And I just look at like Web 1.0 is kind of like AOL. It's kind of like,
Yeah.
man, if you think of like Wikipedia, maybe a user generated.
Oh, the dial-up
Yeah,
sounds.
yeah, but
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
Totally.
it was just websites and information for sure. So then there's a .com boom, and then you have Web 2.0, which is kind of like more peer-to-peer, like maybe AOL Instant Messenger, maybe things like more social media,
Yep.
Facebook, etc. And then now Web 3.0, we were just talking about this last night, and Mike is like, hey, describe Web 3.0. I'm like, well, it's kind of the decentralization of it's not just
Yeah.
Google anymore. It's
Mhm.
decentralization of even currencies of like
Yeah.
I was joking about Bitcoin is booming, but it really is. It's
Mhm.
probably going to
Yeah.
hit
Yeah.
100K before this episode airs and before the Dow Jones hits 50K. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, you have new forms of currency and the ability to really have globally kind of a universal language and communication with
Mhm.
I mean, Meta and the metaverse, and you guys are way more geniuses at it than I am, but I just try to stay current, and AI is a part of it. And
Mhm.
there's definitely dangers, drawbacks, but benefits.
Right.
Like, if we
Yeah.
want
Yeah.
to, we could take this podcast episode, run it through Otter AI, and get a transcript that's pretty good. And it'll say, Jill Reed said this, Matt said this,
Yeah.
Micah, the co host, said this, and Josiah,
Right.
this is
Yeah.
when you said this. So if we want to repurpose content on purpose and say, turn a podcast series into a book or a blog, that's really time saving and helpful. Opus
Yeah.
Yeah.
Clip could take this and just short form edit, throw captions on it that are pretty decent. And as I talk to Brady Shear and others, when you're taking your primary information that you content you've created and repurposing it, he's kind of like giving the head nod, the thumbs up on
Yeah.
Hmm.
using AI to do that. But when you're like, hey, OpenAI or ChatGPT, write for me a new book on young adult ministry, that's like, oh man, we don't want to
Yeah.
Yeah.
delegate that kind of authority to AI. And so, man, how do you see AI evolving? How do you see ministry changing? We've touched on that. And even how do you see the mental health of those in our communities and young people, especially being impacted by social media, Web 3.0, AI?
Mm.
I think there's a couple things that maybe we can come back to this once we start talking about what we're doing. But I think there's two questions that right now that I think humanity is wrestling with,
Mhm.
is what is real and what is truth.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
And so, we touch on this. One of the things that we're working on is this online social media course. And part of what we talk about is disembodied communication and the whole idea of how much we are relying on digital communication, as opposed to, the days when I laugh about when we're in 1998, how much has changed. Well, most of our conversations now are happening in the digital space. Like even right now,
Mhm.
this is technically the digital space. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
and so that's a huge part of the conversation is what is real, what is reality, and as far as the whole push into AI, that's a huge conversation.
Mhm.
When you start talking about all of the commercials that we're seeing right now, if you're watching anything online and you can see the commercials for Google or whatever it may be, like it's all about like they have chatbots that are they're not people, but they're just
Yeah.
chatbots that AI, but the users who are interacting with them can't tell the difference between the AI
Right.
and a real human
Yeah.
being. So we're going to be wrestling with that question of what is real, and then it's going to lead into the question of what is truth. And I think that's where the ministry impact is huge, and the reliance, having the faith tradition inform what truth is, as opposed to, what might be out there. And so even when it comes to, like you talked about, like when you're using generative AI, like we're asking questions for research, whether it's technology or history projects with the boys or whatever it may be, like is what we're getting truth,
Mm.
right? Because ultimately what AI is doing is scraping from the existing internet. It's not
Yep.
imagining something up. It's actually like pulling from what's out there. And what's out there, do we or do we not know if it's truth? The old adage from the early programming days is garbage in, garbage out. And if AI is, scraping garbage, we're going to get garbage.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so it's more important now than ever for the church to be informed about technology trends, where we're going, AI, Web 3.0, what does this look like for the future? Instead of when something like COVID hits and we realize we're behind, it's more important now than ever to stay
Yeah.
on top of it,
So
to be
good.
able to minister effectively.
That's so good. And I'm even thinking like is there any way that we could ever get ahead? Just like the thought leaders and having those people speaking into those processes, people like yourself that see things before they happen,
Yeah.
have been in this space and this sphere for so long to really realize like what is real, what is truth, removing the curtains of the lies or the
Mhm.
conceptions or anything that our kids could get into that older people can get into, like the phone calls you get of where are you, I'm locked, I'm in jail, like even just voice recognition. Like there's so many crazy stories
Yeah.
that we're hearing lately. But I know, Jill, you had alluded to the fact that you guys are working on a special project. Can you pull back the curtain and share what is this project, what's the name of it, and what's your hopes of using the skill set that God has given you to open up the eyes, and to bring forth some awareness in this area that you guys are so passionate about?
Well, I think you can talk more about it, but what led us to it really is as parents, with our kids, we were looking for resources that we couldn't find. So anytime we had a question about something or how to guide our kids in a certain way, we'd look it up. And it's like you might find one thing over here and another over here. And you'd have to read these long articles. And sometimes, honestly, I didn't understand the articles because it's all this really techie stuff that I'm not so good at, but he's a little much better at. And we started asking, like, what are people using? Like, how are people guiding their kids through growing social media? Because even if they're not on like they're not on Instagram or Facebook or whatever, but they play Minecraft. And so then there's this chat happening on this Minecraft thing. And we're like, oh, a lot of times parents are like, I didn't even know you could chat with people
Yeah.
on this Minecraft world thing. And that kind of is what began things for us, was that there weren't the resources all curated, I guess, in one place.
Mhm.
And so that's what we were looking for. And we just ended up creating it because it wasn't there.
Yeah. So the whole idea, we call it, the overall branding is called No Curtains. And it's, kind of a callback to the Wizard of Oz and the idea of, well, what a lot of technology is driven by these huge corporations that have billions of dollars, trillions of
Yep.
dollars.
Yep.
And they're basically the curtains that they put in front of us to mask what's happening behind the scenes. And so that's the whole idea. And as we're having this conversation, there was two things that came up. And the first one that Jill addressed is like curating resources. How do you navigate this? And how do you stay on top of it? Like, especially for parents, but beyond parents, for young adults, for teenagers, for
Everybody.
older generations who,
Mhm.
like it affects everyone. And we're all immersed in it. And so that was the big question, is like, can we produce something that's kind of like e-learning, or maybe what we ended up producing was an online video driven course. And the first topic was social media, because that's the thing right now at the
Mhm.
forefront. And so we put this together, and but even as we're writing it and we're recording it
Like within the same week
the
sometimes.
same week, we started this. This is something that's been in our hearts for years, but really in the past 3 months have we devoted a ton of time to this.
Mhm.
And even in like she's saying, in the course of a week, we had scripted and we started to record something. We had to change the script
Yep.
Wow.
Because
Yeah.
things have
because
changed
things have
already.
changed.
Yep.
And so we wanted to we definitely wanted to provide this guidance, technology guidance. And so that's what we've been putting together. But in the course of that, the second thing that came up is this is not evergreen content.
Yeah.
Like we could record something or print a book, but it's going to be out of date tomorrow.
Mhm.
Yeah. The
So
half-life of information is like less than 3 years.
yes.
Yeah, of
Yeah.
course.
So in the course of that conversation, we're like, well, we need to put it in a space that allows us to continually update and continually stay on top of things. So it ended up being this kind of hybrid of guidance but also this curation of content and news and like being able to stay on top of what's happening, and not just for the sake of change or what the latest product is to hype, because that's what a lot of tech blogs are about. Hey, Meta's got new glasses, woohoo, everyone buy them. Like it's not.
That's not the information we were looking for.
Yeah, there's enough of that out there, and there's enough hype. And the question for us was, okay, this idea of looking behind the curtains, can we produce something then that says, all right, but what's happening behind the curtains?
Yeah.
Like we'll not get lost in breaking news and hype, but can we dig a little bit deeper and wait for the news cycle to slow down and then say, okay, but here is something to consider. Here's something to look at. And the biggest thing that we found is like Jill alluded to this, like reading a lot of information online, whether it's through news or blogs, it's hard to understand. Like when you start talking, like I'm guessing for a lot of listeners, when you say Web 3.0, what does that even mean? You know what I mean? Like,
Totally.
but when you read the articles and everything online, they use Web 3.0 as if it's just everyone knows what it is,
Mhm.
or even describing AI. Like it's so complex. There's so many components when you talk about AI. What does that look like? And so that was a huge part for us, is like, can we take that information, dig into it, and then kind of output it in a way that's understandable for everyday people, for you and I,
Yeah.
because I know you look and you say, hey, we know a lot about it, and that's only through research and study and experience. But the reality is, I feel like I'm just like you. And what I'm doing is just digging in and finding, okay, what does this mean for real life application?
And making it shorter, because if it's like, honestly, I'm not a 15-minute article reader. Like
Like
if
too
it
long,
takes
didn't
me,
read. TLDR.
I'm like, what? If this is more than 7 minutes, I don't want to, especially if it's filled with new concepts, because
Yeah.
it's exhausting to like go through and have to break down that whole thing. And then your, 11-minute article is like a 35-minute. When you have kids too, it's hard to dedicate that time to it.
Mhm.
But ironically, it's also vital information. So it's like that balance, and we're trying to make it shorter for people.
Because there's I think what we found, especially in 2024, I don't want to go too far into this topic, but like people are looking for independent and reliable news.
Mm.
And to come from people that they know and trust is more important than just what's being blasted out there.
Mhm.
And so we're seeing a whole new wave of independent news sources. And so as we were talking about this, it's like, well, that's what we want no curtains to be. KNOW, no curtains, to know the curtains that are in front of us, that technology, these tech giants are putting in front, to see behind, and to see the wizards and the machinery behind it, how it works.
Yeah.
And so it's all about curating tech news and providing valuable resources for real world application.
Mhm.
Well, I think that's so relevant in the day and age in which we live. So you're taking these bigger concepts and dissecting them and bringing forth to parents so they can apply some of these things or be aware of some of these things. And I
Correct.
think
Yeah.
that's so helpful. I think just raising littles. Like I remember us having friends that just had a baby a couple of months ago, and they're like, "When are you guys going to give your girls a phone?" I'm like, "They're 3 and 4." I go, "We should probably think this through in some regard, but they're not getting one tomorrow." So it's like even just like the screen time, the social media, how we present
Yeah.
our family, how we are taking the information that we're being fed. Like, are we going to regurgitate it and actually know what it is? Or are we going to dissect it and really like sift through this thing, like almost on a cellular level? Because I look at anybody you talk to, like, is in these big industries who's creating these forms of technology that is addictive to our eyes, that just, you have 2 seconds to play the next or blink and
Yeah.
it plays itself, like you don't even have a button to hit sometimes of next or stop. So even just looking at people in Silicon Valley, of like, they don't even allow technology in front of their children. They're the ones they're not the ones consuming this, but they're the ones producing this. And like, oh, my kid's 16, like they're never going to get a phone until they're out of the house. Like, not an option. Oh, they don't have any forms of social media. And I'm like, wow. So you'll feed the rest of the world a version of poison and create it for everybody else, but you won't serve it in your own home. Like, so there's a healthy, and I know it was an extreme example, but it's like, wow, like we have to be mindful as parents, as pastors, as people and leaders, and to stay ahead of it, because the worst thing that we can do as a church is fall behind and then really try to pick up the pieces of people's families, people's purity, kids getting trapped in situations of addiction that they maybe should have never been offered in the first place, just because a parent didn't know. So I appreciate what you guys are doing, and I love the no curtain concept. And
the website is knowcurtains.com, KNOW curtains.com. It'll be linked in the show notes. We're talking with Matt and Jill Reed about ministry and technology. And have you guys seen the documentary called Social Dilemma?
Yeah. That was one of the things that we watched early on Netflix too.
No kidding. Like, Micah, when you said that, it reminded me of, like, man, when they interview a lot of the people who kind of worked in the machine, and whether it was Gmail or any of them, just kind of raised some questions. And I mean, man, Steve Jobs was known for not allowing his kids to have some of the products that he was, so eloquently advocating for, these pocket crystals and, different things. And, the 100 songs in your pocket, all of those. And man, I want to, if we can, equip because there, believe it or not, Matt and Jill, there's a lot of listeners who are actually older pastors, senior leaders, parents, deacons, just people who like have a burden for the next generation. And I want us to pick your brain for a moment on like ways that they can safeguard their time online. I'll go first with one or two if it's okay. Just last night, a pastor friend of mine who's actually on the younger side of things, but he got hooked with this email from a website called alignable.com. And it was a phishing scam, and they ended up emailing all of his website like email contacts, and he got taken by it. And this is happening. I get 2 or 3 of those emails a week. And then I think of often like people that we know from the Christian senior adult community, people like maybe 55 plus, almost, gosh, a few times a month, I get this messenger that's it goes, is this you in the YouTube video? And it doesn't actually say this, but that's like kind of,
is this you in YouTube? I'm like, when was the last time you were out in front of a camera where you'd be on YouTube? What are you doing?
it looks so legit. And it's this question that is in Facebook Messenger or on Instagram DM. And it says, is this you in the YouTube video? And then people click on it. It asks you to log into Meta, Facebook, or Instagram. And then they contact all of your contacts, or they try to, like, there's another recent scam on Facebook where people are like, oh yeah, my sister-in-law is doing a garage sale. Just Venmo me the money. And then it's not actually your friend selling the car and the truck and the Vespa, like, so I just want to look out for our listeners. And I've been waiting to say that because I talk with Brent Silke and we see all of these dear friends of ours that are getting like taken advantage of in the digital spaces. Am I off track, or what are a few things that we can do just to safeguard people's time online?
I'll first say that we're all susceptible.
It's so easy. It's so easy because they're so good at what they're doing. So don't feel bad if you're someone who has
whatever age.
Whatever age, because it might be like my mother-in-law is constantly like, someone called about this thing. Is this real? but also our age. Like I almost got tricked by a Joanne Fabrics 90% off sale and I clicked on it. I'm like, oh, this looks cool. But then I'm like, wait a second. So I went to their website in a separate thing and there's nothing. So whatever I would have shopped on, they would have taken my credit card information and
Yeah, it's real.
ripped me off.
Like full transparency, just 2 years ago, I fell for a crypto scam. And so I'm usually like,
We're so skeptical.
yeah, like really good at that. But I was duped.
Yeah.
And that's like, I love that you said skeptical because that's a huge thing, especially when you're talking faith communities. I think we look at skepticism as sometimes something that's frowned upon. And to me, it's like what's one of the biggest things that we need to have moving forward is we need more skepticism. And I know that's like we don't say that in
As a
faith
healthy
community.
gift.
Healthy,
Like,
yes, like it's okay to have critical thinking.
yeah.
And I think even after like through 2020 and the COVID times, I think it's just more important now than ever to be skeptical, and especially when it comes to things tech. And not to the point of like, conspiratorial, but just getting to the point of like, okay, I see this email, I see this message, to come at it with a skeptic's eye. And that's where I always say, like, if you can't do that, if you cannot be skeptical, let me do it for you.
Yep.
That's what No Curtains is. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Let me be the one that like looks into that and digs into that for you. But I think that's a huge thing.
Yeah, I think your first defense is actually a non-tech defense. It's your own brain, it's your own feelings
Good.
of like,
Yes.
this seems fishy, or maybe it doesn't and it seems awesome, like mine did, where I'm like 90% off. But there's still the part that's like, okay, even though it seems cool, let me go to the actual site first in a separate link and see if this is
Yeah.
happening. So yeah, I think the number one protection is not a technology protection. It's yourself.
Yeah. And I think the other thing for older generations, but really for everyone, one of the things that we talk about in this online course, which we'll talk about in a second, is the idea that if we need to be looking at everything that we do online, whether it's what we're producing or what we're consuming, as an investment.
Mhm.
And I think one of the things that I've seen a lot of leaders over the years, when we're in the digital space, we're a little less guarded. We're not afraid to make certain comments or to post things or to, just forward things that we haven't verified whether or not it's true.
Mhm.
And I think it's a little bit of freewheeling that we need to pull back and realize that what we're doing is we're investing. And so especially for leaders and pastors, that's a huge thing that I saw coming off of COVID, is them not realizing that they're taking certain stands, even politically, where it's like, you don't understand that you're burning a bridge with
Totally.
that Facebook comment.
Totally.
That might not even be accurate
Yeah.
either. So then
And
that's
and you might even be right. You might even have the moral high ground,
Mhm.
but it's a kind of a waste of your social capital because you're trying to do it in a digital space and it's not going to work. And it actually, like your years of service and investment in that individual that you're arguing with, you just flushed it down the drain.
Mm-hmm.
Like 20 years of ministry, like integrity and respect.
Mhm.
I watched a lot of that get flushed down with Facebook comments. And so that's a huge thing to realize, is like when we start talking, it's one of the things we cover in the course, is disembodied communication, and the idea that you have to realize that it is a version of reality, is an illusion of reality, but it's not fully reality of what we see when we're in face-to-face conversations.
Wow.
Well, I think that's the hard part too, kind of going back to the people getting tricked or ripped off and whatever, but tying into that is you do have that capital. And so like I got a link once where it was like, or I saw it, someone else had reposted it and it was someone I knew and trusted. And it was dumb. It was like, look, these cell phones, if you put them all together, they pop these popcorn kernels and they make popcorn. What is this doing to our bodies or whatever? And so I'm like, Matt, look at this. And he's like, they just drop popcorn he's like, it's not popping. But I almost passed this along. Like, I almost invested some of my social capital in a really dumb video about like cell phones making popcorn pop.
So we talk a lot about, so the course, I'll just jump into this. So the course that we had, the first online course, is drivers training for social media. And we do believe it's for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely there's more of a urgency, I'd say, for parents.
Yeah.
But if you think about it, none of us have gone through any type of training for social media or anything online.
Yeah, we're a generation like all of us, all of our generations are a generation where we can't ask our parents, how did you handle this situation with social media or this, because they didn't go through it. Like
There's
Totally.
no
I can't
history.
ask
Yeah.
my mom that because she doesn't have that frame of reference. And then at the same time, especially our ages where you're young adults or you have parents where you're like, what are you doing online? So it's like you're looking out for yourself, for your kids, and for your parents or grandparents. And it's like that's kind of the first time in history, I think, where something like this has been introduced, where there's zero guidance and you're a parent or a young adult or, you know, an older adult trying to navigate it. And it's so difficult.
Yeah. And so, like, I think a lot of us, like, we talked about how things have changed over the years for us. Part of it is like we're the frogs in the boiling pot where the temperature's slowly being raised. So, like, it seemed
Yeah.
really fun at first
Yep.
how social networking began, but seeing how it's evolved and how it's changed to where it is today is vastly different. But because we've been immersed in it, early adopters in the beginning, we're not realizing all the tricks that are keeping us on screens or
Yeah.
the deceptions and the illusions that are there. And so that's the whole point of driver's training for social media is two things. It's helping people formulate a plan. So it's knowing
Yeah.
the vehicle,
Yep.
finding your compass, and choosing your path. Those are the three goals for the
Mhm.
course. And through it, what we're trying to do is expose the three illusions of social media. And again, social media is broad. We're not talking about the 8 tech giants. We're talking about things like Planet Minecraft. We're talking
Mhm.
about news sites that have comment sections.
Yeah.
Everything that you have an interaction with someone online is defined as social media because it's an online interaction in the digital space. Um, and the three things that we talk about are the curtains of reality, which is where we talk about disembodied communication, the curtain of free, how these services, we don't actually give them our credit card information. They're not actually taking anything out of our bank account, but there's a cost.
Yeah.
And
Totally.
then the third thing is the illusion of control, this idea that we do have control over our phones. We do have control over these social media platforms. And going through all the things that they actually intentionally designed to keep us on the platforms.
Yep.
And so that's the whole concept of driver's training for social media. Again, it's for anyone. But again, for parents, would you give your kid the keys to the car at 16 and just be like, here, go for it? And that's
Yeah.
the only thing that you do. No one does that. You know, we go through a process of,
You're watching your parents drive when you're a kid.
yeah,
Like you're
Yep.
already seeing how they drive and
seeing
what they do.
modeling their behavior. And then you go
Mhm.
through like this course where you actually learn about all the rules and regulations of the road. You
Yeah.
have to understand how your vehicle works and all that. Then there's actually a probationary period where you have to drive with your parents together. And so that's one of the things that we walk through is that whole process of like, the concept of driver's training, we think is so valuable for social media in the online world because it does take intention. And it does take time.
Yeah.
I think it's easy for us to be like, hey, give us a online content filter
Just give me a filter.
and we're good. And it's like, you're not really preparing the
Yeah.
next generation
Yeah.
for digital communication. And so that's the whole idea behind the course.
It reminds me of having a car and being like, well, it has airbags. Like, great, but maybe teach them the speed limit or not
Yeah.
to
Good.
cut corners really fast or yeah, just getting to know your vehicle. When I took my driver's test, I failed before I even left the parking lot because my brother forgot the emergency brake was broken. So as soon as I turned it on, it was stuck on and I couldn't get it off. And I was like blocking the entire course. And the guy was so mad at me. But like I didn't know it was broken because I didn't know that car. And in a way, we find social media kind of similar to that. Like you need to know how it functions in order to use it to the best of your ability. And we definitely don't say just don't use it. We want to inform people and they make decisions on how much they want it in their lives.
Correct.
Right.
It's beautiful. Jonathan Haidt calls our cultural moment more than a demographic of people, our cultural moment of 2024, 2025, the anxious generation. And we're all a part of it. He compares growing up on planet Earth versus if we were to grow up on Mars, is the difference between a play-based childhood and a phone-based childhood. Highly recommend that as a book, as a resource. And man, the other thing that I'm just thinking about that's a little bit different, but it's like in there, he's talking about, man, if you're trying to figure out ages or whatever, like no phones till what he's 14 or 16, no social media till 16, 18, or even later. And man, I think that that's some wisdom, some just really wise words right there.
Mhm.
But one of the things that because we're in the digital space, Micah and I, it's like we read the Great Opportunity Survey put out by the Pine Tops
Mhm.
Foundation, and they said, like, where is what is the church going to look like in the year 2050? And there's 7 key things that we could do to help I think it's 20 million Gen Z stay in faith or start up their faith, stir up
Mhm.
their faith rather than leave the faith. And
Mhm.
one of them out of 7 things was, where is the digital Billy Graham? Where is the digital John
Yeah.
Wesley? Or where is the digital George Whitfield? And we have 2 weekly podcasts. We've kind of made a commitment that we're not going to just doom scroll and aimlessly wander without a path or a plan on social media, but we want to be a bright light in a dark place, whether it's encouraging young adults in their faith
Mhm.
or
Mhm.
equipping and training leaders along the lines of the faith of the next generation and future of the church. And one thing, because of our, I don't know, involvement in the space, is like we've realized a lot of one other thing that's going on a lot is phone calls where it will look like and sound like somebody real and it's
Yeah.
not. And so one of the things I just wanted to jump in, and I feel like it fits perfect with this conversation because we've been talking about it and we've been talking about it with our parents, is like we need a family code word. And ours
Mhm.
is, no, wait, just kidding. I'm not going to share ours, but maybe for the listener, I just want to land real practically. One of the things that Matt started the episode saying is, I think that if you're a pastor listening, or you're a part of a church listening, there's probably a teenager or a 20 something that you could hand the keys to the car, so to speak. You could hand the camera or the laptop or the phone to, that you could actually, give them some training, but also give them an opportunity to find a lane in ministry and in sharing the gospel,
Mhm.
storytelling. The other thing is, you might want to take the course and sign up today. And a last thought is, I just thought, like, man, having a family safe word in the instance, it's kind of like, honest to God, we've been asking, how do we know if it's us calling, or how do our
Right.
parents know if it's us calling? And having a safe word, it is not foolproof, but it's one of those things to answer your question, Matt,
Mhm.
like, what is real? Reality,
Yeah.
what
Mhm.
is true?
Yeah.
And it's becoming increasingly difficult to discern. But
Yeah.
that's just one of the things. Is there any other kind of closing pieces of advice before we do the 5 and 5, the lightning round? Any other things that you wished we would have asked you, but we didn't yet?
Yeah.
That's so hard. I don't
Yeah.
know. Because it's like when this is like what you're in, it's like we're eating and breathing this right
Yeah.
now.
Yes.
So
Yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah.
like there's so much. But actually to touch on what you're saying, I just want to validate that because we with the boys, when we would leave them, they didn't like have phones necessarily, but if we had to go somewhere for a weekend or a day or whatever, um, they had like a symbol or a word too to send us if anything was wrong. And we had people like nearby. So we're like, just send that and we'll know that something's wrong and someone will come and get you.
Beautiful.
And whoever you're with wouldn't even know. And so it's kind of like you almost need that now, like you're saying in those situations, because you don't know if that's your mom calling you in distress or not. And so
Mhm.
I think that's such a great idea for people to use.
Agreed.
But to add to that, I don't know, do you have any like advice or
I think, yeah, again, just
aside from
I
skepticism?
get that skepticism is your ally. Can I tell a real quick story?
Yeah.
Please.
So, I took the boys to a Timberwolves game a couple years ago, and it was Crunch's birthday, which is the best basketball game to go to because for kids, like all the mascots are there. They
It's
give
super.
away a jersey. It's amazing, but it fills the stadium, so you get a lot of new people who have never been to a Timberwolves game before. So we went to the game and we get parked in the parking ramp and we get down into the Skyway, and the Skyway is just like clogged, like we can't get by. I'm like, this is not. We've done enough games where like this is not usual because there's so many entrances. So we're like, I'm trying to look over everyone, trying to see looks like there's an opening down past the crowd. So I grabbed the boys' hands and we make our way through the side, through the crowd of like a couple hundred people. And as we're doing this, everyone's starting to kind of grumble. Like, what are they doing? Why are they skip? Hey, don't cut the line. Slowly the murmuring turns into a couple people like getting angry. And finally we break through to the other end of the line. And there's like a completely empty skyway. The 200 people that are waiting for one entrance, not realizing there's dozens more a few hundred feet away. And so then I turned around and told everyone. And as we're hustling down to beat them, like I turn around and then finally the crowd's following. And only thing that set us apart in that moment was knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
There was 200 people like lemmings waiting in one entrance and then getting mad at us for like being like, we're not waiting in this line, we're going farther down.
Not only not questioning it, but that they're getting angry at people not doing it with them.
Yeah. And so that like I always look at that like knowledge is the key. If we can again use whether it's no curtains or some other resource, like stay connected. It's too easy to just like shut off the outside world and what's happening. And then we just blindly accept things as is, and we can't do that any longer.
Right.
It's so good. I feel like and to the young adult ministry leader listening, you have an unfair advantage in just the volume of young people in your life. Like on the board of our nonprofit, there's somebody who has his PhD essentially in AI. So I'm asking him questions and he has headhunters from Meta and all of the companies always trying to get him to come work for them and different tech startups that Google invests into. But I think that there is probably No Curtains is an amazing resource. And then I would also just say like it honors the young adults if you're older or even if you're my age and you're like, hey, teach me about this, because that's a great way to say like, hey, you've been to a Timberwolves game. I'm literally going tonight, by the way. So that was helpful knowledge. Excited. I haven't been there this year, but huge Wolves fan. And but man, guys, this is an amazing conversation about AI, the future of the church and technology as it relates to ministry. But are you up for a 5 in 5 challenge? We put 5 minutes on the clock, little rapid fire.
Okay.
Okay. Ladies first. We'll do ladies first. We'll do 30 seconds each. So we'll both have the same question. Here is a question. Jill, you can start us off. Let us into your brain. What are you learning at the end of 2024? And what are you hoping for in 2025?
Okay. Being kind of a nerd with like, I love DIYs. So almost all my things right now are like how to make your own candles, how to
I think we could be friends.
How to make a built-in bookshelf. Like those are the those are the things I'm most geeked out about learning right now. And I'm also trying really hard to learn like animation, how to do that. So I have like the in Procreate and different programs. I'm trying to figure it out, but it's hard when you're more artistic and less techy. So it's a little slower for me. That's mine.
You're doing it.
What about you, Matt?
For me, it's getting back to sketching, just with pencil and paper. Something that I used to do when I was young, and then just life gets busy. It's something that's not a priority, but trying to come back to that and incorporating it into some of my quiet times as well, which I think gives me a little more focus.
Awesome. I love that.
Okay, what's a hobby that maybe on a day off that you'd be doing for fun? Maybe it is sketching and DIY, but what's something you'd be doing as a family maybe for fun on a day off?
I love to write, so I write a lot. And kind of ours are tied. I mean, not really tied, but Matt's gotten into, well, you tell him.
I found like I've been doing bookbinding.
No way.
Okay.
No way.
So like again, call back to Gen X, but like I've got all these CDs and all these CD covers, and I've been like taking them and changing them into notebooks.
Or like a little journal.
So then I use the CD covers as the cover of the book. So getting into bookbinding, and then even some of our books that we have were
we don't like the binding.
like Lord of the Rings or whatever. We just make our own binding.
Oh my gosh.
You guys are creative. Oh my gosh. All right, here's the curveball. If you could ask Josiah and I any question under the sun, what would you want to ask today?
Okay. Well, I don't know, because for me, it always comes down to food. So I was going to ask you, like, either what is your go-to meal that you absolutely love, even if it's just like mac and cheese, or what's your go-to restaurant? Like, where do you love eating?
This is a good question. I don't think we've ever been asked this on the pod. Micah, your go-to, if you're picking where we're going where?
Oh, I like Shogun. I'm into sushi.
She
Every
loves
date night, he's like,
sushi.
Yes.
it's Thursday night. He's like, where do you want to go? I go, you know my answer. My first go-to is sushi. I don't make it at home. Like, it's just too fancy dancy. Like, what I want, they can do.
And then mine is like brisket, barbecue. Like even I love it if our life in the ministry takes us to Nashville, great barbecue, Atlanta, great barbecue, Texas, amazing barbecue. Minnesota, there's a few good spots
Nice.
locally. And then I mean, so I guess I'm kind of like into the meat.
Into the
Yeah.
meat. Oh my gosh. And I'm into the healthy foods. But if I had to make a meal instead of going to a restaurant, I would make homemade stromboli.
And it's
So I make the
Oh,
homemade dough, get all the meat, vegetables, whatever I want. It's so good. Stromboli.
so
that's awesome.
back to you guys. What is your dream in a sentence?
You got that one?
Well, I said for me and probably for both of us, it's like our dream would be to help people and travel.
Yep.
And if those two could combine, even better. Like that's what we want to do in our lives.
Love it.
You guys have an amazing like family vlog that's fun to follow along on YouTube
Yeah,
as well. So
a lot of fun.
we'll link
Thank
it in
you.
the show notes. We'll call you out on the channel. People can check it out.
Thank you.
All right, here's our last and final question. You can each have 30 seconds. If you could leave the listener with one piece of encouragement today, what would you want to leave them with?
You go first.
I'll go first. Okay, so one of the things I always had when I was youth pastoring, I always had sayings, like little quips or phrases or whatever that I tried to just repeat over and over again. One of the things like later in life when I get in 30s and 40s was you are the guardian of your own dreams.
Mhm.
So whatever it is that God has laid into your heart, like own that and protect it. And even like a dream like we have right now, like some of the things that we've been dreaming with friends, it's like it's valuable when people speak into that, but it's also something that
It's no one else's responsibility
correct.
to make it
Love
Wow.
happen.
it.
Like we are the guardians of our dreams. And so even when there's moments of where you feel like, oh, this could never happen, this dream is never going to become a reality, you got to guard that. You got to guard that with everything that you have.
Yeah, I think for me it would just be to tell people that they have, I think, more value than they realize. And they're more important to people than they realize. That would be mine, I guess.
I love it. You guys are amazing. You are just encouragers. You shine a bright light in the places where people wish they could go, even if it's not their dream. You have people spurring you on, and or I'm just inspired by even just this conversation of knowing that we are doing some of the right things in our household when it comes to social media or technology,
Yeah.
but also knowing like I love what you guys said at the end, like believing in people and knowing that their worth is there, but also like we are the guardians of our dreams. And I love that you said that, Matt, because I think as a listener, you might be in a position or a place where like maybe you're in transition or maybe God's put a dream in your heart and you think he put it there and you feel like he's teasing you. Maybe it's time you dust that dream off the shelf and you
Yeah.
start
Yeah.
putting forth some energy, start putting forth some prayer, taking that before the Lord and say, like, Lord, this is a 10-year-old dream. I haven't done anything with it. Like, I need to be obedient. So I just pray
Mhm.
for the listener today. Like, there is stewardship in the platforms God's given you. There is encouragement through the platforms that God's given you, and that you're shining a light on Jesus and making his name known while you're building his kingdom and not your own in the process. Because I think that is a temptation in the world of which we live, is to build our own kingdom through platforms of social media, through platforms of leadership. But in reality, all of that glory should be pointing to God, and all we are is an open vessel. So I just value you guys as a couple, that we view you as those vessels just wanting to make God known. So we're cheering you on. We're praying for you. We'll be in the prayer closet, not behind the curtain, because the veil has been torn on that level, but we're excited to see what God's going to do.
This is
Oh,
the
you
Young
guys are
Adults Today
awesome.
podcast. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Awesome.